Chapter 7, Painting. Distinguish between the pigment, binder, vehicle, and support in paintings. Explain the composition of watercolor and some reasons artists use this medium. Summarize the process of creating a fresco. Describe the composition and technique of encaustic. Identify the characteristics of tempera. Discuss the reasons for the popularity of oil paint. Explain the recent rise in the use of acrylic paint. And demonstrate knowledge of contemporary innovations in tools and supports for paint. Introduction. Drawing and painting are related. They have overlapping processes, and drawing is often a prelude to a painting. This is Gerhard Richter's abstract painting. Medium and process of application is part of the message. For many, art means painting. There's 3 ingredients of all paint. That would be pigment, binder, and vehicle. Pigments provide color, usually in the form of fine powder. It must be stable while drying. It must resist fading over time. Advances in chemical industry in the 19th and 20th centuries allowed for synthetic pigments in a range of stable colors. Binders hold pigment particles together. Oil paint contains linseed oil as a binder. Tempera paint contains egg yolk as a binder. Binders hold pigment particles together. Oil paint contains linseed oil. Tempera paint contains egg yolk. Vehicles make paint a liquid and can be further added for thinning. Turpentine in oils and water in watercolors. The support is a structure underneath the painting. It must be sealed with sizing. It's followed by a primer for a uniform surface. Support is a structure underneath the painting. It must be sealed with sizing, followed by a primer, like gesso, rabbit skin glue for a uniform surface. Water-based paint media is used for thousands of years. Pigments mixed with water as a vehicle and gum arabic as a binder. White rag paper is the most common support for watercolor, and it requires neither sizing nor priming. In watercolor, you use a staining technique. Paint is applied in thin, transparent washes. Highlights are obtained by leaving areas of white paper unpainted. And opaque means non-translucent, is used for detailing. And know that gouache is an opaque watercolor. Watercolor has a fluid spontaneity suited for outdoor impressions. This is Winslow Homer's Boys Waiting. Homer was devoted to watercolor. Boys in water seem sketched. Traditional Chinese watercolor technique. Artist employs a water-based black ink, often uses ink without color. Chinese regard painting as descended from calligraphy. Lashida is a five-deer Hermitage, uses both ink and watercolor. This is Lashida's 5 Deer Hermitage. True fresco is also known as bon fresco. Pigments are suspended in water and they're applied to damp lime plaster surface. Most modern frescoes utilize cartoons. Plaster dries very quickly. Only the portion that can be painted that day is prepared, and joints arranged along the edges of major shapes. Fresco is popular in Renaissance Italy. Frescoes favored medium for painting on church walls. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling is a fresco. Raphael's assumed portrait of Francesco Maria della Rovere on the right is a detail of a much larger work in the School of Athens. All frescoes. True fresco, bomb fresco has a rapid staining process. Lime forms calcium crystals that chemically bind the pigment to the wall. It's a durable surface. It's best suited to drier climate zones. Raphael's assumed portrait for Francesca Maria della Rovere. Detail from the School of Athens. We have a revival in Mexico. The use of fresco in the 1920s is the government's support of the arts and public buildings. Diego Rivera is a leader in the movement. He was invited by the Detroit Institute of Arts to create a mural. This one's called Detroit Industry. It's a blend of tradition and contemporary subject matter. Mural depicting Detroit industry. With encaustic, pigments are suspended in hot beeswax. Wax is the binder and vehicle. It has lustrous surfaces. It's known to ancient Greeks. It flourished in Egypt during the Roman colony period. The Fayum portraits are memorials to the deceased, and this one is called Portrait of a Boy. The temperature control is necessary. It's less commonly used today despite modern devices making temperature control easier. This one is Jasper Johns, Three Flags. He's a modern artist who used encaustic. It's a waxy consistency of paint yields a textured surface. You can see nearly every stroke he made. Tempera is known to Greeks and Romans. It's highly developed during the Middle Ages. Egg yolk is the binder. It's mixed equally with pigment and thinned with water. Matte, which means not shiny, so it has a matte surface when it's dry. And gesso is a preferred ground for egg tempera. It's a chalky water-based liquid. The advantages of tempera is you can achieve sharp lines and precise details, and it doesn't darken with age. Disadvantages of tempera are colors change during drying. They get darker. And it's difficult to rework, and it's not flexible, and it requires a pale underpainting. Here's George Tooker, The Waiting Room. He's one modern artist who used tempera to good effect. He has painstaking execution, high detail. Tooker said slowness of working in tempera fit his way of thinking. Oil is a favorite medium of Western art for 5 centuries. Linseed oil recipe was perfected by 15th century Flemish artists. Jan van Eyck, Madonna and Child with the Chancellor Roland. Gesso covered wood panel, used glazes or transparent film of color. It has refined, detailed textures. Advantages of oil: it provides both increased opacity and, when thinned, greater transparency. Has a slow drying time, and pigments change little when drying. It's flexible, and it allows use of canvases. There are application techniques to know. Impasto is thick layers. It can be thinned. It can be worked wet on to wet. Direct painting, it can be completed all in one sitting, and you can work wet into dry paint. Tom Whittle's Rembrandt's Indulgence was Van Gogh's Dilemma. It is a small work, only 4 inches by 3 inches. It is direct painting. It is really thick impasto near the top of the work. The yellow paint is thinned by turpentine, and smooth brush strokes in the middle heighten the trompe-l'oeil quality. Trompe-l'oeil is for the eye. Realism. Elizabeth Murray was the leader in oil painters breaking out of the box of the rectangular canvas. She painted irregular shapes. This one is Bop. So that is not on a white surface. That's all cut out. Elizabeth Murray paintings let out of the zoo. Irreverent attitude is key to her early success. This artwork is falling. It was the next step was painting onto irregularly shaped parts. She bid farewell to the rectangle, And BOP lies between abstract and representational art. It's also between painting and sculpture. This is Elizabeth Murray. This is Falling. Acrylic was invented in the mid-20th century. The binder is acrylic polymer, which is synthetic. Its vehicle, water, is more convenient than toxic turpentine. It's relatively permanent paints, and they rarely darken or yellow with age, and they have a very rapid drying time. Yun Hee Min takes advantage of acrylic. This one is Into the Sun, number 10. Uses pure bright shades and applies paint with a squeegee. Painting continues through a near-death experiences. If you've heard painting is dead, there are times when some have wondered whether it might become obsolete. It flourishes as artists discover new types of paints and methods of applying it. John Sabras, he recovers poisonous sludge from streams in Ohio, derives powdered pigments from it, blends it with usual binders and vehicles. The color palette is limited but striking. Chroma S117 is this little artwork. The composition is mostly abstract, completes the cycle, makes commercialized quantities, sells and uses money to subsidize environmental remediation in the streams. Airbrushes are small-scale paint sprayers capable of projecting fine controlled mist of paint. They have an even application without individual brushstrokes. You get subtle gradations of color. Graffiti artists use them along with spray cans, and they favor quickness of execution. This is Kelty Ferris, uses spray guns to finish most of her works. Orion, several layers of hand brushed patches, and then there are sprayed dots. It creates a jarring vertical mixture. Kinakishi uses digital television screens as support for oil paintings. This one is gesture data. The artist's intervention becomes part of the screen. Oil paint on a flat screen monitor.